Okay. All right. Well, welcome, ladies. This is it. This is a full attendance today. It's going to be fun because we have a smaller group. If you, so this is what I'm going to say about timing. I am going to try to do my best to get through all the letters. If I do not, so that means that I'll probably have to go at a little bit faster of a pace. And if you can always go back to another letter. We'll spend a little bit longer on the basic strokes to make sure, because once you got the basic strokes, you are good. But I'm going to do my best to get through all the letters, but it's not typical that I would get through all the letters. If we had 4 hours, then I might get through all the letters, but I also am cognizant that sometimes sitting for 3 hours, we'll take some stretch breaks, and feel free to take breaks whenever you need to stretch your hands, to stretch your neck, to stretch, like it's quite interesting how if you're not used to this, your body will tell you, oh, what are you doing? It's like when I took an adult ballet class once, I was like, I didn't even know I had muscles in certain places of my body, but it didn't feel like I was doing anything in class, right? So it's kind of like that. So do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But we're going to get started with a fun little exercise. It helps me to know where you all are coming. Let's see, share my screen. And we're going to do this one. All right. Okay, so we're going to play some bingo. And the way that we're going to do this, you can see the instructions on the top, but I'll also drop it in the chat right now. And just take a couple moments to mark any of the ones that apply to you. Oh, now I can't play the music. That's okay. It's only going to be a couple minutes.
Oh, how does it work? Sorry.
Okay, so what you do is, you know the Zoom bar?
Yeah, at the bottom.
So you click on view options in the Zoom toolbar.
Oh.
Is that there?
Review option. No.
Okay.
Maybe it's something else.
Let's see. The instruction. Sam or Catherine, can I get you to help me, because my view looks different as the host? Where was it? Where did you see it?
So it's up at the top of the bar for me. So it's up top, and then I click on view options, and then annotations, and then stamp.
Sorry.
No worries. Zoom is always changing things. So I mean, I created this a while ago, so I'm like, maybe it's out of date. I don't know.
Okay. Here's my little, I'm gonna do a stamp.
I can't.
I can also go ahead.
Is there 4 rows, Justine? Because is it only 4 rows?
Yes, it's only 4 rows. Yeah. Oh, I forgot. You're on your Chromebook, right, Sam?
So I'm writing it in the chat.
Yes, right? That's good. I totally forgot. Chrome does not play friendly with these things. It's all right. We're a small enough group that we could probably do it on our independently, but because I do this typically with a larger group, and so it helps me to get a quicker read of the land. Okay. Has anybody taken classes before?
Just yours.
Okay. It just gives me an idea.
Maybe as a child, I have a faint memory, but not really.
Okay. No problem. Okay. Thank you for doing that. That helps me see what's bringing you here. Okay. I'm gonna stop that. And it looks like Morse code, Sam. I love it. Okay. Joelle, I am going to send this to you. It won't get to you just yet. But I'm was a little bit last minute with this one. So, but I think Catherine and Sam, you have this already, but we are going to look at this one first. Okay. So I like to start with big picture of what we're doing here. So you're going to get a hard copy of this in the mail, Joelle. So unfortunately, it's not going to be surprise mail anymore because you're seeing it here.
Love it.
But what we're doing here, I usually share this one as a bit of a way to share my story a little bit and why I started these workshops. And so it starts with actually when I was 8 years old and my grade 3 teacher bought us fountain pens for cursive practice. And then I came home with a pen and I started to draw these massive, like draw in the, think like life-size letters around, and I was dancing around the living room with my pen. And I didn't realize that I was dripping dark ink all over my mom's beige carpet. And by the time I figured it out, it was like there was drips everywhere. And I remember so clearly that she did not scold me. She did not yell at me. And she just quietly cleaned it all up. I do not know how she had that much patience. She doesn't remember the incident, but I share that story because I think it was an important part of my early not having a sense of shame around getting messy and exploring and having a creative sense of play. And so I really want this to be a space where you can tap into that fun spirit. And I believe that fun rejuvenates our hearts. And we also are going to refresh our heart because lettering is very slow and mindful. And I rediscovered lettering only as an adult. Took some classes, but only, that perfectionism where you're like, I need to have all the conditions perfect before I do art. So I would do it like maybe once every couple of years or only during art class, and it would just never happen. And it wasn't until I burnt out quite severely that it came back to me after 3 years of kind of losing all sense of self. And creativity and lettering was one of the first things that came back to me. Because when you're burnt out, you're kind of like, who am I? Did I really care about the things I used to care about? And so this kind of came back in a fun way. And I was like, oh, actually, no, that is you. You weren't just putting on a show for people necessarily with your art, right? So I want you first and foremost to be able to take lettering as a tool just for yourself. Now, if you end up wanting to give away your lettering as cards or whatever to bless other people in your life, that's wonderful. But I want it to start with you first. And then second, I went to this art, after I started lettering, I got a certain style under my belt. And then I took this art class with one of the longest time instructors in Vancouver. And it was of a particular instrument that I was terrified of. And I went to the class wanting to make friends. I mean, where else can you find people who are going to geek out on pens with you? And I went, and my table was just not chatty at all. There was a pair of friends who were talking with each other, and then there was the people next to me were just totally into what was in front of them, which is fine. But I realized, oh, I'm kind of sad, but okay, I guess I'll just stop talking. And so my workshops are intentionally to have all this chatty time at the beginning because I want you to be able to connect in that sense of community, especially right now with COVID and our social lives are kind of not what they used to be. So I hope that you're able to kind of make some new friends here and geek out over the ink and the pens together because not everybody cares as much as we do, right? You are in good company here. And then finally, there's a bigger picture of creating a life of meaning and impact. And so what I mean by that, these workshops actually started as by donation. I still donate a portion of the funds to, it used to be human trafficking, and I still do a little bit of that. But I'm also kind of really becoming more passionate about racism and mental health and the intersection of that. And so I'll be donating some of the proceeds towards some causes connected to that. And so that's the big level stuff. It's not just about the lettering. And Let me just stop that now. And now I want to know from you what you are here for. Is there something specific that you want to learn? Is there something that you want to be able to do with what you learn here today? Let us know where you are on your lettering or creative journey.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay, Kath.
So I am here to actually learn from a human being and not YouTube. You know, the opportunity to kind of talk through stuff, because that's what I miss from YouTube. Like, you can watch it, but you can't say to somebody, oh, why is this happening, and then get, you know, actual real-time feedback. I get a great deal of satisfaction from pretty lettering. So both personally, like in my own journals, and then I like to make cards. So I'm kicking my cards up a notch by being able to write the words instead of like just stamping words that somebody else made up. I can actually put my own thoughts to it. So
Beautiful. I'm glad you're here. I'm not making eye contact with anybody.
I'll go. I'm always hesitant to jump in first because I'm always happy to. And I don't want to be like the one.
No, take up space. Take up all the space.
Okay, so this workshop could not have come at a better time. I'm so happy to be able to just carve out some time that's just for something enjoyable, and we don't have to have a specific result. As a result of a couple of things that are going on, not specifically with me, Justine, just so you don't worry, but with a few of my very close friends, I found myself thinking the other day, I don't have any more emotional bandwidth for anyone else right now. Like, I'm giving it all to these two places and trying to like stay above water with myself, just from an emotional energy kind of level. So yeah, I'm just here for the peace and the camaraderie. Thank you, Justine.
You are in the right place. Can totally relate with the bandwidth part too, for sure. Yeah. Catherine?
Yeah, I think mine's really similar to you. Like, it's been a little bit of a slog the last little bit. So it's just nice to like be able to do something creatively and something for myself as well. Like, it's a lot of, like, I find creative outlets have been my self-care throughout a lot of the pandemic. So it's really nice to have more creative outlets.
Yes, definitely. Well, amen. You are all in the right place, and I'm so glad that you are here. Okay, and then this is the last talky thing that I'm gonna do, and then we'll dive in. I feel like the host has like way more buttons. Like, what is going on here? Okay, so this one is my what I call rules of engagement, community agreements. And I think we're already on the same page when we were just talking about the perfectionism around our pens and our journals and things. But I still, I get people sometimes coming into this space with some of those invisible hangups. And so I want to be able to go over this briefly. So we are here to practice presence over perfection. So perfection police are not allowed here. And being present is about being present to everything from the sound of the pen, the sound of your breath, and just being present with yourself. And that also means that we're going to be using parts of our brains where we're not even thinking about spelling. So I don't even care about spelling or if it even looks legible. This is really about being in the moment here. And I share that because one of the art classes I took early on, it was probably the first big art class I took, 5-day class. And this professional looking calligrapher guy was next to me. He had already taken the class before with the traveling instructor. And I was like, what are you doing here, dude? And he had such beautiful work. And I just didn't get the point of why he was there. And I lost a couple of days of joy because I was so busy looking at what he was doing and comparing what I had to there. Now, in this case, you can't see one another's work, But you might be comparing in your head naturally to either what I'm doing or what you saw on YouTube. And we're doing baby steps. We're walking like a toddler today, right? So you're going to be wherever you are in your journey. And we just want to, like Joelle said, be here just for the process. Connection over comparison. So if you do find these weird thoughts coming up in your head, or your mean high school girl voice, coming up, that's where we can get a little bit curious, right? What is going on where did that voice come from? Did I hear that from somewhere? Why do I think that this looks this way? Or why do I think it needs to look a certain way? So just use it as a point of connection with yourself, and then also reach out if you need help in any way. And the final, it's kind of overlapping, but be curious and be compassionate. What comes up in your voice, see where the page takes you. Get curious about the kinds of pens that you have. What is it that you don't like about that pen? What do you like about that color? Just being present to all of that. So I just wanted to cover that so that we have maximum enjoyment of this time, and just setting our expectations so that we know that I'm not going to make you a wedding calligrapher in 3 hours. It's just not possible. Sorry. It's always funny. Sometimes you get people like, they take a class because they want to do their wedding calligraphy, and they're like, oh, I might have needed a little more lead time to get my letters in a place where I actually want people to see it on an invitation or place card or something. But okay, so that's it. Let's dive into supplies, which you showed me. Can you actually hold them all up all at the same time, just so that we have the visual of it? I'm going to be using 2 Tombow pens, and I'm going to be using some watercolor inks. Excellent. Okay. Paper. What do you guys have for paper? Okay. Notebook. You've got the handouts and you have lined paper. Okay, perfect. That helps me to know what I need to be showing on the screen. Since you don't all have the handout, that's totally cool. The handouts, some instructors like to do it so that you've got the tracing. And normally if you're in person with me, you would be doing that. But I actually don't feel like you're missing out on anything if you're not tracing, because some instructors actually prefer to do it so you're not tracing. And I think they're basically like training wheels, right? So you can trace, but eventually, like what you're doing in tracing and practicing the same strokes over and over is you're getting it into your muscle memory essentially, right? So it's not a big deal if you don't. I don't even use lines typically normally. But for this class, I will use them so that you can see everything technically where everything's going. Okay, but for your future practice, if you're someone who really wants to make your pens last a long time, for example, especially like the ones with a more sensitive tip like a Tombow, which will eventually it'll eventually lose its sponginess and it'll lose its tip. Which is inevitable. But if you want to make it last longer, that's where you can get into a smoother paper. So either a marker paper, which when you buy like a mixed media or watercolor or, sketch pads or whatever, I usually go for it'll say marker, marker paper or whatever. Or you can also, I'll send a supply list afterwards that has 2, usually those like color, what do you call them? Color office copier paper that usually is a little bit heavier weight, and there's 2 brands, one that's a little bit more premium. Those ones are good for it's just got a super smooth edge. And then the other thing you can do, which I'll also demonstrate, is tracing paper. Tracing paper tends to be very smooth as well, and tracing paper is great if you want to just if say for example you don't have a printer, for example, and you just have the one sheet with the lines, you just add tracing paper on top so that you can you see the lines underneath. So that's for supplies. I will send you a supply list afterwards. And now let's go into the technicalities. Okay, I'm going to shut some windows because I have way too many windows open. And all right. Does anybody here know the difference between, hang on, hand lettering and calligraphy? Anybody guesses? Okay, I'm getting super geeky here, but I'm going to, yes, this is going to be fun and community oriented, but I'm also going to give you the technical stuff. So you're getting all that. Okay, so share screen. Here we go, definitions. Okay. So technically, calligraphy is the art of writing. So it's usually smaller. It's rhythmic. Imagine, say, poetry or a wedding invitation or something like that, a manuscript, old school contract. Think about something like that. And you're usually following a very specific set of rules about that lettering style, and you're trying to make it look pretty much like a font, where but actually for traditional calligraphy, you're practicing it stroke by stroke. You're actually red marking your paper to see, you want to get it as consistent as possible. And it's more writing, and you kind of get into this rhythmic move around it. Whereas lettering, who here has done bubble letters or drawn anything like that? Yeah? Okay, yeah. So bubble letters technically is hand lettering. So hand lettering is simply the art of drawing versus writing. You may not necessarily do it in a single pass. You might go back and make it thicker and color it in and put dots. So that's technically the difference. And you're also paying more attention to composition, where you might have several styles where you're trying to get them to, like it might be a poster or something like that. So that is officially the difference between the two. And now you are more knowledgeable than the average Instagram lettering stalker. Okay, so that's the technical definitions. And now we're going to get into the basic strokes. So grab your paper, and I'm going to, okay, what I'm going to do, just trying to think. Okay, I'm going to share just for a brief second here, and then I'll show you my I'll start demonstrating with the pen. So these are the basic strokes, and these are the ones we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so working on these, and then we'll take a break at that time. And we're going to start with these basic strokes here, and I'm going to now share my camera so that you can see a demonstration. Why do I not see it? Oh, because I need to stop sharing first. Hang on. Stop share. And okay, this is where it gets a little complicated because I have multiple cameras happening here. Hang on. Okay, advanced content. There we go. There. You see that? Is that a focus? Okay, cool. So actually, I'm not even going to do what happened to my graph paper. Okay, I'm going to start the basic strokes using tracing paper. So you can either go straight on your page, or I'm going to use tracing paper here to start with. Okay, so how you hold your pen. A quick note also on large pens versus small pens, small tip pens. It is technically easier to start with small tip pens, but I like to go with the large tip pens because they're a little bit more unwieldy, which means that if you can master and begin to get the hang of it with my help, if you can get the hang of these large pens, you can then handle pretty much any pen that will come after you. And it also is easier for demonstrating, as well as it's easier for you to see the thicks and thins when you are looking at it, when you're learning at first. Okay, so you're going to take your large pen, Tombow pen, Tombow, or any of the ones that are that size, and you're going to, the way that it works, you're never going to be holding it up and down. It's because that you're going to damage the tip that way, right? So this way, what you're doing, excuse me, you're going to be it's going to be at a slight angle, like 30 here. Thank you, Joelle. And I'm actually going to turn off my notifications. Oh, hang on. I just saw an email from someone who was interested. Oh, give me 1 second. This might be someone who wanted to be in the class. And I only just saw the message now. So good thing I did not turn it off. 1 second. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, we're all good. It's like, it would be sad if I found a message that said they wanted in and I only saw it at the end of the class, right? So, okay, so what you're going to do is It's going to be at a slight angle. Okay. So not like this, not too flat. And you're going to be, oh, my pen has a little, it's like a lint or something on it. Okay, get that off. And what you're going to do is you're just going to go at an angle and you're going to just press down. Okay, so one of those common questions or confusion points potentially is when you are, people think that you manipulate it based on, that you get the thicks and the thins based on like if you go flat, it's going to be thicker. And if you go higher up, it's going to be thinner. That is not actually the right way to do it. So instead, what you're going to do, you vary the thickness and the thinness by the pressure that you put on the tip. Okay, so imagine if I were to come over and put my finger on your pen. This is not going to move. You're only going to move up and down. You're not going to move in any kind of 360-degree turning or anything like that. Okay, does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah, so what I want you to do for this first round is to practice different types of pressure. Try a lighter pressure, try a medium pressure, and try a heavier pressure. See how thick it can go. Some people have a lighter touch and they may not be able to get as thick, but don't be afraid of pressing down on the tip. And then try what I call a carrot, where you're actually varying the pressure as you go. Or you could try reverse as well, a reverse carrot. And try to get the hang of that. And just get in the rhythm. And see what kind of marks you can produce there. If you have any questions at all, you can pop them in the chat.
I have a question.
Or yeah,
should I write it in the
you
chat?
you can totally unmute and just ask as well. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I've noticed that when I do those kinds of lines,
yeah,
there's like more ink at the top and at the bottom.
Yes.
So is there a way to make it more?
Okay, so actually that's a really interesting one, because it's probably also, well, it is, the tombos are super inky, and you're naturally going to have a little bit of that variation, which is actually some people like that as an advantage, where you have it's a little visually more interesting, right? Because you get this ombre effect, right? And if you use like a shiny glossy paper, it looks really cool, because there's a more pronounced ombre shadow effect. But yeah, so you don't have to try to get it to look thicker, but I think if you want it to look more consistent, you would just keep the pressure all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's darker. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're starting super easy, nothing complicated. I love the sound of it on the paper. I mean, ultimate geekiness. Okay, getting into the hang of that, feeling good. Okay. Now we're gonna do the opposite now. So that's a downstroke from top to bottom. And now we're gonna do a from bottom to top. Okay, so this is an upstroke. These are the thin strokes. These are the ones that are a little bit hard. Oh, the other thing I should say too is the speed should be, I'll just demonstrate on the stroke that we just did. The speed should be like real time, super slow. You might go faster later, but for the purpose of learning and practice, I generally go about this speed. And I don't want to see like that happening at first. That's like flicking. I want to see more of a deliberate, place the pen down, lift the pen up. Okay, and that's going to be more important for some of the later strokes that we're doing. Okay, so now let's do an upstroke. So for an upstroke, it's going to be a light touch from bottom to top, is always lighter. And you're going to start at the bottom and you're just going to go up. And you can see I'm a little bit shaky because I'm not warmed up and I feel my fingers tingling a little bit because I haven't done this in a while. So you're just going to go up lightly, feather light touch. And let's see here. When you are doing your stroke, imagine if you were painting on the wall and you would be moving your entire arm, your wrist and your arm go up. So I want you to be paying attention to, rather than moving just, like your wrist around, you're going to actually be moving your entire wrist and your entire arm. Okay. Oops. So how does that feel? Good? Yep. It's so funny because you're on mute, but I can see you all have very expressive faces, which is awesome for online learning. I was watching, I think it was John Oliver, and he was on Stephen Colbert and they were chatting about, so funny. I need to like clip it and like replay it or something, because he talks about what it feels like to be doing a monologue in their home studios during the pandemic, where it feels like you're throwing it into some ocean in the yonder and you have no idea what's going on. Is the joke landing or not, right? Anyway, okay, so I will also say at this point that you can also I can send this to you in a PDF later. I literally just created this early this morning, so that's why I didn't send it out yet. If you want to get the angles, you need some guidelines, but I like to go without the angled lines, because you all have a natural handwriting style. And some people have a very upright, way of writing, and that's totally cool. We're just getting started, right? And unless you're doing like a traditional form like copper plate or something that's measuring the angles, I don't want you to get hung up on that and try to squeeze into that mode if your hand doesn't naturally do that. Okay, how are you feeling with that? It feels a little bit, was it feeling shaky at all, or getting the hang of that? Okay, yeah, it's quite natural. Like I always, when I first heard about the concept of warming up, I was like mind blown. And I was like, but that makes sense. It's like piano drills when I was growing up learning piano, you have to warm up. And so there are days like today, I'm using this as warm up. I'm doing this big custom piece for a guy, and I've done it so many times. He happens to be an art director, and so he actually is very precise. And so I was like, I did it on a day where the ink was not flowing, my hand was cramping up, and I was forcing it. And so warming up is actually, I have shaky lines too, and shaky days, and that's part of the process. So don't be too worried about the shaky lines just yet. Okay, so now we're going to do let me show you this other one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this, to the exemplar, which I will send you the PDF because I realize I forgot to send that to you. Okay, I'm going to give you the code for this. In the handouts, you'll see this. So the solid lines represent the downstrokes, and the dotted lines represent the light, thinner upstrokes for any of these. Now we're going to start doing some compound strokes here. So you'll see where that goes. Where that matters more is some of these other strokes where you might end up starting in the wrong place, the opposite place or whatever, which is easy to do. I'll try to point that out when we get to those ones. So when you look at your handouts or the PDF, that's what the code is there. Most other lettering exemplars that I've seen do not give this level of detail, but I hope that is helpful to you there. Okay, so now we're going to go straight into these basic strokes. Hang on, I've already forgotten which one is we're going to do the understroke first. Okay, so back over here. Okay, oh, my hand's cramping up already. Okay, so now we're going to do the understroke first. So this is where we're combining a bit of a downstroke with an upstroke. So we're going to start, oops, make sure we're on screen here. Sorry. So you're going to start with that downstroke, and then you're going to come up. Looks like an inverted candy cane. And so you're going to start lightening up the touch about here to get that transition. Stretch my hand. How does that transition feel so far? I mean, we're just getting started, so.
Rough.
Yeah, so just keep going. We're being toddlers with our pens, and it's supposed to be a little bit awkward.
Oh, I'm going too high.
Now, I'm going to show you another way to do it as well. Not everybody likes it, so I want you to try both and see which one sits better with you. So one way you can do it is actually treat them like two separate strokes, okay? So you could do that and then do a separate upstroke. Now, technically, it's not as smooth, and I don't typically use this way, so it's even less smooth for me. But you could use the double-ended tip, the opposite end of the tip, to fill in some of these details. Like say, for example, here, it's not as smooth, right? So I can just do these little touch-ups. It's like reverse whiteout, right? Or colored whiteout. So that's a nice little tip with these dual tip pens that you can do. So I'll demonstrate that one more time here. So doing it as a separate stroke. And in the end, you, the person who's looking at it, if you're gifting it to somebody, they don't know your process to get there. So test it out to see which one feels better for you. How's that feeling? Getting the hang of it? Okay. Now we're going to do the overturn stroke, which is the opposite of what we just did. And so that's where we're going to start on the bottom, on the baseline, and then, oops, I want to make sure my fingers are not getting in the way. There we go. Okay. So you start on the bottom. It's going to be a light upstroke, and then heavy down on the other side. Going up the ski hill and down with more force and gravity. This one usually is a little bit easier to do for some reason. Okay.
I love the sound. I just
I know.
I never noticed it before.
Yeah, I actually really, when I have a live class, I love actually hearing all of the pens doing it at the same time. I'm such a geek. It makes my heart happy. So one thing I will point out about particularly this particular stroke, you're going to try to get it so that it's even width between here and here. Okay, so generally you don't, oh, sorry, doing it wrong there. You don't want it to be like that. Okay, so you're trying, now later on you might vary your hand a little bit, but for the basics in the beginning, you're going to try to make it as equidistant as possible. And that's just so that you have more defined shapes of letters. Okay. And then we're now going to do a compound curve, which is where we're going to combine both of them together. Okay. So what that looks like is, let's see, I need to refresh my ink here. Okay. So we're going to start with, we'll start with a downstroke first. So it's going to be like a bit of a roller coaster, basically. So you're going to start at the top, come up and around, and just go like that. Okay. And then you can also do reverse, where you're starting on the bottom, around the top. And again, you're trying to keep everything equidistant, like mirror image, if you're to flip it. Okay. So give that a try. How are those transitions feeling? Good. Okay. Wow, my hands are really tingling today. Feeling good with the transitions? Okay. Next is going to be the oval. So the oval, there's a couple of ways to do this one, and I'll demonstrate why I like the one I like, but you can certainly do both of them, and you might use them in different variations of the letters. So we're going to start at 10 o'clock. No, wait, 2 o'clock. Go up, 12 o'clock down, and then end there. Okay. So the thing with these pens, actually, this is a little bit of a skinny. I'm being more skinny today. I want to take up more space. And so the other way to do it is start at 12 o'clock. So if you start at 12 o'clock, it's got a slightly, okay, so that's the 12 stop. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the 12 o'clocks, and then I'm going to go back to the 2 o'clock and why I like the 2 o'clock. So you can see with the 12 o'clock here, there's a bit of a gap here, right? So that's where you got to like fill it in. It's not as smooth in that sense. Now, sometimes when you do an O, you wouldn't fill it up at the top anyway, right? But I'll tell you why I like doing it with the 2 o'clock way, because this oval is used in the A and the G and P and Q and all of these letters, right? So what I like to do there is, so if you do the 2 o'clock method instead, and you can do your best to like, that's pretty as good as it's going to get for me in terms of like matching it up, but still you still see a little bit of thicker ink because of the overlap that I've created right from the start to finish. So when you do 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock even, what you can do then is, and there's our first letter, right? So those two touch, and it kind of is like a band-aid where it connects, right? So that's why I like to do the 2 o'clock method or 3 o'clock method. I changed my mind of what letter I was going to do there. So, okay. So the other thing with the 2 o'clock, come back to show you here. And this is, I hope you can see this with my setup here, but it's almost like when you go up light and then you're actually almost like pushing it. I'm exaggerating it there to get a bit of that square top. I don't know if you can see that quite so clearly. There's kind of this, a flat top almost. I don't know what to call that. Right. And if you were to, let me just demonstrate with my other, where's my other pen? Missing my pen. Where did I put it? Well, that's peculiar. Okay, let's use this one. That is so weird. This is not the pen I want, but that's okay. I'm using a different pen here just to show if you've got like real bristles on a pen or paintbrush. There's this like, it's like a pushing, almost pushing back. We'll go back here. Oops. Can't see anything here. All right, so hold up what you got so I can see what you're working on here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a sec so I can see better. Okay, good. Beautiful. Good job. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, so take a bit of a hand stretch. I don't know why my hands are so tingly today. What is going on with that? I'm going to do a quick, actually, let's finish the basic strokes up and then, well, no, I'm going to do this one little tip first and then we'll finish up the basic strokes. Then we'll take a break. Okay. Everybody feeling good still? Okay. I need can everybody have a cartoon face for me, please? I mean, you guys are all, man, I could have like, I wish I could bring you all in all of the sessions that I do. Because I can see how you're doing just from your faces, which I love. Okay, so I did want to, because it's kind of like the holy grail to like try to get, you can even see some of my letters, or depending, I switched to a different pen here and you can see I'm a little bit rusty because the tip is a little bit softer and harder to go with. But when you want to get the variation between the thicks and the thins, right? When you're just beginning, don't worry about like those super fine line hairlines. It's more about the contrast between your thicks and your thins, right? So if I were to, even do like this. This is not that thin, but it's quite a bit thinner than these strokes, right? But generally speaking, technically, we are always trying to aim for as thin as possible, right? And that there you see one of the challenges therein of going too light, where it starts to break apart, right? And that's just trying to get into that rhythm and the right touch, right? For both, right? That being said, I will also say it largely depends on your pen. If you have a super hard tip, it is a lot easier to get that kind of a, so I'm going to use a small tip here. This is a Tombow Furunosuke pen, and it's got a super hard, it's the hard tip, right? So because you can see, this is more proportional for this pen here, right? You can get a super fine tip, but that's because the tip is not that, it's just firmer, right? It's like the difference between using a soft HB pencil and a hard 2H pencil. You're just going to get a sharper line with the harder tip of lead, right? So depending on the pen you're using, you're not, you know, with the Tombows, you're not going to be able to ever get like super, 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 super fine, because it's not, it's a soft tip, or it's kind of like a spongy tip, right? And that being said, if you were to use a real paintbrush, and this one here, hang on, let's get a fresh page here. This one here is a water brush, and it has real bristles. I'm not going to touch it because it's going to be like, it's going to spring ink everywhere. And when you have real bristles, I'm curious, Catherine, in your stash, if you have any pens that have real bristles. Okay, yeah, which brand is that one?
It's the Psy ones.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if you have real bristles in a paintbrush or a paint pen of some kind, this is actually a good place to tell you my story about those kinds of pens. Okay, so when you have real bristles, depending on if they're, okay, let's be very specific. If they're acrylic bristles, not like some of the natural haired pens, you are able to get a super, 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 super fine touch. But the disadvantage of it is that they're bristles, so they're super soft, right? So you can't feel the feedback, especially if you're just beginning. So when I took a design class once, we were designing logos or kind of like name signature things. And they gave us a Tombow pen, and they gave us a calligraphy, a broad edge tip for like something like italic. Now, because the broad edge tip is a pen that I first, here, let me show you a sample. The broad edge tip looks like a square, right? And I don't even know if there's ink in this one. Of course, there's no ink in that one. I forgot to do the introduction. Anyway, a broad edge tip was the first one I used, so I didn't need instruction. I knew how to use it. But in that class, because we were focusing, so if you have a highlighter, that's also a broad edge tip. But in that class, because we weren't focusing on the pen or the technique, and it was more about layout, they didn't teach us how to use the Tombow. So I was super excited. I was like, oh my gosh, it's a brush pen. I've been wanting to learn brush pen, but it looked terrible. So terrible. I was like, what is wrong? This is a bad pen. And then I went and spent $20 on a soft tipped, pen like this. And it looked even worse because the bristles were softer and I didn't have any feedback at all. And it was like, well, I just spent $20 on a pen and it looks terrible. Maybe I'm the common denominator, right? And then I was like, but damn it, I spent $20 on this pen. I'm not going to give up on this pen. So I just started writing my grocery lists, writing my to-do lists. I did everything with that pen, and I slowly eventually picked it up just by osmosis and practice. I mean, probably dozens of hours before it started to look like anything, right? So I am telling you that because it's a supply tip, like what do you call it? Like a little FAQ or whatever about tips. And so with soft bristles, you get the advantage of a little more control, but it doesn't give you any feedback, right? It's like there's no training wheels whatsoever, and it feels really loosey-goosey. So that's why I like now, even though I still don't love the Tombows because of that first allergic reaction, because I wasn't set up for success, they are a good, the Faber-Castells, the Tombows, the Michaels brand, Artist Loft, any of those ones are good because they are medium springiness. They're not so hard that you're not getting any feedback, but they're soft enough that it's spongy enough that you can kind of see what you're doing, right? And then at the end, I usually encourage you to try the bristles then. And, you know, it's like with piano competitions growing up, like you're used to your piano, you're doing a recital or competition, right? And you got to figure it out within those first few seconds of what it feels like, right? And you adjust to your instrument based accordingly, right? So I don't know anybody who took piano, or, you know, I always like, what, the violinists, they get to take their violin, and that's not fair. Anyway, okay, that was a side tip on supplies and things like that. Okay, so we're gonna do, let's see, what's next? Okay, the ascending loop and the descending loop. Okay, ascending loop and descending loop. All right. I'm going to share, I'm a little bit out of order today because I'm a little bit rusty. I'm going to go back and do a bit of an anatomy lesson. Lettering anatomy, not hand anatomy. Let's see here. This is the one here. Okay. So I should have done this earlier, but it actually applies right here now too. So I want to give you the technical terms around lettering and typography as well, for graphic designers. So essentially what you're doing here, the fat middle part of the letter is the X height. Pretty intuitive, pretty obvious. So the top of the X height is what you call the waistline. And then the bottom of that X height is the baseline. Again, nothing super fancy. It makes a lot of sense. And then the very top line is called the ascender line, and the bottom line is called the descender line. Okay. And pretty obvious there. And then I already explained earlier, the upstrokes are going to be thin strokes, and the downstrokes are going to be the thick strokes. And then this little bit here is called the entrance stroke, and then the tip at the end is called the exit stroke. Again, pretty intuitive, not like funny terms that you have to memorize or anything like that. Okay, so why that matters is in the worksheets. Let's go back to the other one. In the worksheets here, again, I'll send this to you. So if you want to print it out or use it as tracing paper, you could also just make your own rules on your graph paper or paper. So the A stands for this height, right? Pretty intuitive there. So we're going to do the ascending loop, which I need to remind myself, what does that look like? Okay, yeah. So this one is, we're going to start at the waistline, okay? And then you're going to go up and then down to the baseline, okay? So I'll do that again. I was looking at the screen, so it's not, this is totally not the right shape, but so you're going to start at the waistline, go up with a light stroke, up to the descender line, and then come down heavy on the other side until you get to the baseline, okay? So this is the one that some people make an error. Like, say you finish this class and then you come back to it 2 days later. Sometimes if people are just tracing and they're not being there, they haven't got it in their memory yet, you start at the bottom, and that's not what you want to do. Because what happens if you start at the bottom? Light upstroke, thick downstroke, right? That's reverse. That's not what we're trying to do here, right? That is not right, okay? You want to start from the waistline up to the ascender, and down to the baseline. That's the most common error that I see in terms of like, it doesn't feel intuitive naturally to start there. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so let's do that one for a little bit, see how that feels.
Justine,
Yes.
so would you say, like, regardless of how big you're doing your letters, you start the loop almost at the center of your
Yes.
where your letter will be? Okay.
That's right. That's right. Obviously, yeah, great question. It's around the proportions. So if you're using a small brush tip, let's do a little bit of a demo with that. If you do a small brush tip, okay, so let's say I'm going to wing it. Okay, so you're doing a small brush tip, your letters are going to be half the size, right? Or even smaller than half the size. So if that's my baseline and this is my waistline, I'm going to start at the waistline.
Okay.
Great question, though. It's going to be proportional to your pen. Because what happens if you were to actually draw a full size letter with a thin pen, right? You just don't, you're not going to see as much contrast, right? So because of the size of the nib or whatever, right? So great question, Sam. Okay, so let's do a descending loop, which is the opposite. Okay, so you're going to start at the waistline, come down, and then up. Actually, it's a little bit messy. So I'm getting a little bit sloppy here, but you're technically more precise. You would be, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, where you're trying to get the transition a little bit. You start your transition a little bit earlier. Okay. So try that, but also do a reverse mirror image where you're actually starting at the ascender line and coming, oh wait, I need to look at the exemplar for a second here. Oh yeah, this is for the F and the Q. It's a really big stroke. It's your biggest stroke ever. You're going to start at the top of the ascender line and you're going to come down and end at the baseline. Okay. That would be for an F. We're going to get to that later, but yeah, it's like a really long. The F is confident and takes up a lot of space. So this is a good letter to just remind, or stroke to remind us to move the entire arm instead of just your wrist. Because we're working on such big letters here, you actually, if I don't move my hand at all, like you're not able to get as much range of motion. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to moving your entire arm instead of just your wrist. Take some practice to do that. And I still sometimes end up just using my wrist out of like efficiency or lack of energy or whatever. Okay. How are we feeling? Good? Yeah. Okay, we're going to do this last one. Before we do that, is there one of the particular strokes that felt harder to get a hang of? Yeah, which one?
The one that looks like a P and the one we were just doing.
Yes, yes. Yep. So you can practice a little bit more on that as we go. How about Catherine or Sam? Was there one that was a little bit trickier for you?
Yeah, I found the ascending loop was hard as well.
Yeah. What about it is hard?
I think it's just the direction.
Yeah.
It's just the idea of like starting out with light pressure and then ending heavily. It's
yes. Yeah, it's a little bit, the reason why I like to go this slow, even though it's like, it's actually not slower than natural. Like for calligraphy, you know, when people say I have bad handwriting, I can't do this. This is why anybody can do it. If you can draw a line, you can draw a circle, you can do this, right? Because it's literally not writing. You're drawing letters stroke by stroke. And so it is entirely possible. And it's not uncommon for calligraphers to have not great handwriting naturally, because you're going so fast when you're just printing or handwriting, right? Versus lettering, you're being really intentional about every single stroke and you're drawing, you know, the shapes of them, right? So, okay, so we're gonna do this last one. Technically, if you were to YouTube or go to anybody else, that's the basic set of strokes. You already have it all. I add a couple bonus ones because it just makes it easier to see the letters later on. So let me just go to this one now. Okay, so this one, so because these are not technically actually basic strokes, they're compound strokes. Like I don't have a name for it. So maybe you can help me name them. So this one it's like you go up, down, and around. It looks good from what I'm seeing, what you're doing. Yeah, it looks like you're getting the hang of it. Great.
Maybe it's because it's just one foundational stroke. I thought it should look prettier.
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting one because kind of what you just said, like you're kind of dissecting it, like, but then you're also kind of pointing to the ongoing challenge of balance, right? And composition. It's like my Chinese letters will never look great. It looks like an 8-year-old wrote it because I can't quite get the balance of the things to get the strokes right. And because I'm kind of forcing you to not look at letters and I'm making you look at individual strokes, it's kind of like, it's like if you were a copy editor, they train themselves to not read words, right? They literally in their heads are spelling out every single word, right? And so when you're in calligraphy too, you actually there's no spell check in your brain. Like it's quite common if you're in the zone and you're doing stroke by stroke, you do a whole phrase and then you don't even notice that there's a typo in there, right? That's not uncommon, just the way that our brain works. It's kind of a fun little thing. And so, yeah, so I think you're talking about the proportion, like, oh, does it look right? Does it, yeah. So yeah, once you actually put all the strokes together into letters and then into words, there's the basis though, like you get it to look exactly like a font, but then the real fun and the artistry is where you're getting the strokes to match each other like Lego and dance with each other a little bit more, right? And so I'll do a little bit of a demonstration of that too. But yeah, for now it does feel a little bit artificial because we're just working on strokes. Okay, Sam, let's see if, okay, you can always send
I
them
had
as
to
we go
trim
on too.
it. For some reason, it's recording it really big file, so I'll
Oh,
I'll
okay,
send
no
it.
problem. Okay, no problem. Okay, but I'll like I said, anytime now and in the next, month or so too. If you send it now, then I can give you like live feedback and you can adjust or whatever. So, okay. So are we ready to go into letters now? Okay, so. So I'm gonna shut down, let's see here. So we did. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen for a second. So we've done all of these strokes. This is in the workbook. Oh, we didn't do this one, but it's basically just a light little, it's a bonus stroke. It's not officially part of the basic stroke lineup that is typically accepted in the canon of lettering. Okay, so we're not gonna start with A, we're gonna start with the easy ones, right? So this one, we're gonna do what I'm gonna do is demonstrate 2 to 4 letters at a time based on grouping and strokes, and then you can go at your own pace in putting them together. So we're gonna do an I, we're gonna do a U, because those are basically involving the understroke turn, and then we'll do an N and an M because it uses the compound curve, okay? We'll stop share and we'll go back to the camera. Okay, my chat window disappeared. Let's see what happened to it. Okay. Okay, no problem. If you can't attach it, you can always find another way to send it to me later. That should be my next little tutorial, like how to send a video, the easiest ways to do it or whatever, but okay. All right, so we're gonna do the I, the U, the N, and the M is what I said, right? So, okay. So the I, okay, we're gonna do an entrance stroke first, which is a light upstroke. Then you do your underturn stroke, down, thick, thin, up, and the dot. Okay, so you pretty much were already doing that, right? So thin upstroke for entrance stroke, downstroke around the curve, you're gonna go light. And you can even you can experiment with your dots. I kind of like to do like a triangle where it's like a mini carrot. You could do a heart or a star or do whatever you want there. So entrance stroke, and then waistline, thick stroke down, come around the edge. So when you're doing that downstroke, you're gonna lighten up the pressure again at about 3/4 down. Because if you don't lighten up, what ends up happening is you end up with a heavy bottom. So it takes some practice to get used to where you transition out. And like I said earlier, it's not a big deal if it's not completely perfect. You can always touch it up with some of the in-between stuff, strokes. Okay, so that's the I. And then the U is doing an entrance stroke. You do your underturn stroke. And then you do another underturn stroke. And you just do them together. Now, a note about entrance strokes and exit strokes. If it's the first letter in your line, you're going to have your entrance stroke that way. But technically, the exit stroke for this letter is now the entrance stroke for the next letter. Right? So it's like double agent. You've got, so this stroke here is actually the exit stroke for this letter, and it's the entrance stroke for this next letter here. So that's the U. The other thing I'm going to say about letters here is try to pay attention to how much room you're giving the strokes and the letters to breathe. So I noticed even up here, I was getting a little bit like tight in my strokes, right? So if you do a tight entrance stroke, you're going to end up with a tight. So try to like stretch the stroke out and take up a little bit more space. You're worthy of taking up space in this world, right? So let's give it a little more breathing room, a little bit more margin. So how does that feel? I mean, that was the first stroke that we started, right? And it's now starting to come together, right? It's pretty phenomenal that those basic strokes can get you the whole alphabet, essentially. Okay, so I'm going to do the N and the M. There's a couple of different versions of it. So one is going to be, you start with your, my brain is drawing a blank what the strokes are called. Overturn stroke, right? Looks familiar? And then I forgot, I actually have two colors to demonstrate how the strokes work. Then you do a compound curve. So if you put them together, you get the letter, right? So in other words, you're not going to do what I see. Even I did this for a long time too, until I started to actually study it a little bit better. You're not going to do it like this, where you are starting the letter here. See the difference there? So one of them, I'm starting at the midpoint, and one, the blue stroke, is starting at the baseline. Okay, I'm going to do that again so you can see what I'm talking about. So you're going to do your overturn stroke for the left side of the N. And for the second stroke, again, this is why I was breaking us down to simple strokes before. You're going to do an entire stroke from the baseline here. Okay. So let's look at the shapes and see what difference that makes. So if you do, okay, I'm going to do it all in one color so you can see it's going to be a very subtle difference. But so this is the proper way, and this is the improper way. Okay. So do you see the difference? It's very subtle, but you're going to have better formed letters when you do the entire stroke. So this is where I'm still trying to train your eye not to see letters. I want you to see the parts. Okay. Is that making sense? Okay. So let's look at how that looks with the different colors. So there's one other version of the N that you could do. And again, it depends on the marriage of what the other letters in the word are that you're writing. Say, for example, the word beginner, and you've got two N's in there, and maybe you're like, I don't have enough space to do the fat N. This N takes up more space, right? So you could also do an N that is just your basic stroke. like that. Okay. And you can do an entrance stroke and do it like this, right? So there's a couple of variables that you could do there. Now, the letter M, very similar, right? Just add an extra overturn stroke in there. So let's do this. Overturn stroke, overturn stroke, compound curve. Overturn, overturn, compound stroke. So same thing with the N, you can do just a basic stroke. And put it together that way. That's the variable. Any questions? Yeah, we're starting pretty easy, so these ones are pretty intuitive. Still good? Any questions at all for these letters? Okay, let's do the next set of letters, which is going to be V, the W, and VWRO. Vroom. VWRO. Okay, let's do this. 1 second here. Okay, so for the letter V, I need to pull up my practice sheets to see. Okay, so this one is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster too. You're going to start halfway between the X waistline and the baseline. And you're going to go light up, down, and around. So it kind of looks like a compound curve, right? So there's a bit of an exception where, because this is a downstroke here. Okay, we'll do it again. And if you're being super technical about the upstroke and the downstroke based on the pen, what you would get is upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. But you can see that that's not balanced. There's too much attention over here, right? So there's another rule, a rule that breaks the rules, is you generally are going to, actually, I'm going to bring up that rule later. I'm going to bring it up later with another letter where it's a little bit more relevant. So you're going to do upstroke, downstroke, start to transition, lighten up at the bottom of the curve, light up, and light all the way through the stroke. Okay. And there's another variation of this particular letter that you could do as well. And again, it depends on the other letters in your word. Another way you can do it is thick downstroke, just like a base stroke, and then thin upstroke like this. So it's a pointier V. Okay, it's pointier than what you have up here. So we'll do that again. And again, I'm only doing the two colors so you can see the makeup of it. And so when you put it together, again, do every stroke with intention. Nice and slow. And when you put it together for a W, it's the same thing, but you're just adding an extra part to the letter, an extra stroke. So you do your entrance stroke, you do an underturn stroke, again, transition lightly, then up, and then you're going to add a second. So that's the V with an extra underturn stroke, right? And you put them together that way. So we'll do that again. And same variation, you can do a pointier version of it where you come down, you go up, you come down. Okay, and technically there's an error in what I've done here. It's actually not super balanced. If you were to look at an invisible line, I have a line going this way, and then these two lines are going this way, right? So this is actually not a great letter. So to correct that, what I would do is I would actually do my downstroke, the straight stroke, at this matching angle of So you see the difference there? So these are the subtle things that make your lettering, especially when you start experimenting with bouncy letters or flourishes. You're looking for those invisible lines, and you generally want them to look like all coming at the same angle. Okay, and the letter R is going to be this light upstroke and then an underturn stroke. That in this particular style, I like to just bring the underturn stroke slightly below the baseline. It just gives a nice little bit of variation there. Okay. And like I said earlier, with the, when we were doing it up with the V here, you're going to keep this whole entire stroke light rather than going heavy on the downstroke there, because that is imbalanced. Okay. So we'll try that again. You're going to keep it light, and you're going above the waistline with that little loop. And then you go below the baseline for the bottom underturn stroke, or that second stroke there. Okay. Now, depending on the word, again, there's another variation that you could do, which is base stroke. And then kind of like a half underturn stroke there, depending on the word that you're doing. I love this art. It's beautiful, but sometimes there's too much going on with the other letters. And so I might want more simplicity to balance it out depending on the word. Okay. So I'll give you a few minutes to practice those letters. Any questions? Of course, let me know. Okay. Next up, we have the O, J, Y, joy. And then ST. Let's do JOY first. Okay. All right. Okay, what's going on here? There we go. JOY spells joy. Okay, so we're gonna do let's do the J first. So you do your entrance stroke, and then you do your descending stroke down to the descender, and you end at the baseline. And then you dot your J. So technically you could also just extend that exit stroke out. It's a little bit more natural, I think. So again, descending stroke, about 1/5 to go, you're gonna lighten up that stroke there. And then so the reason why sometimes I know it's very natural to pull your stroke all the way up and out. Sometimes I do still like to keep it super compartmentalized so that I can do a flourish separately. And so, but again, I'm slowing it down maybe in an exaggerated way so that we can kind of see all the components, but you can eventually do it all in one stroke if you would like, but I like the slow mindfulness of it all. And then the Y is similar in putting it together. You're going to do your entrance stroke. You're going to do an underturn stroke. And then you're going to do your descending stroke. And your exit stroke. I'll do that again. Entrance stroke, underturn stroke, descending stroke, entrance stroke, light up, understroke, and then you start to lighten up your touch there. Come up with a thin upstroke, thick downstroke for your descender. You start to transition out and then around. All right. Okay, let's do the O. The O is a little bit finicky if ovals are feeling not quite right for you or not in the flow yet, that's fine. So one is, remember with the oval, you can start at the top at 12 o'clock and you lighten it up about quarter way down between the waistline and the baseline, and you end at the top and you add a light exit stroke. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Try that again. And you can either do just add it on top like that, like a cherry, or you could add more of a circle and a loop like that. Or you can do, start at the top, come around, and do it all in one stroke. So this is similar to that R and the V, right? Now the thing with this one, this can be a nice one where it adds a little bit of visual interest, but you just be careful to make sure it looks like an O. I've seen people stretch it too much in their artistry so that it ends up looking like it's not that clear. It's like, is that a V? Is that an O? What is that, right? So I still really am a strong advocate for legibility, unless you're trying to create something more artistic that's not about legibility. So that's one way to do it. Or reminding you that the other way to do the oval, which I generally like to do this because it suits better for all of the other letters that require an oval, like an A or a B, oh, sorry, A, G, D, all of those letters, right? You start at 2 o'clock, light upstroke, thick downstroke, and then light upstroke. So you end there, you see a little bit of where it overlaps there, but then you can hide when you do another letter. So I'm actually now showing you an A, which is not what I was intending to do, but let's go there. So start at 2 o'clock, come around, thick downstroke, and you start to lighten up here. And then you do the underturn stroke to get your A. So let's keep doing that one. And again, I'm noticing I'm kind of uptight today. So I'm going to try to go for a wider oval to give it a little more breathing space. And because we're using really fat markers as well today, like I guess if you're using a thinner brush tip, it's like the little mini pens, it won't matter as much, but it is nice to try to get a wider shape of your letters. It just gives more breathing space. You can see the definition of the strokes a little bit better if you do that. Okay, give that a try. Okay, so question about the U and the V. My V looks like U. Yeah, okay. So let's see if I got this right here. So the U, so the question is actually more about the V, right? The V not looking like a U. Yeah, okay. So if we do a U, let's do this first. Okay, so if we do the V, okay, so this is where I think it's gonna, okay. That V with the point is more obviously a V, right? But let's say, okay, well, I'm gonna start doing a demo of how letters fit together, okay? Before I do that, I'm gonna show you one more set of the C and the E. Let's do that so that I can do this letter for you, or this word. So if you do for C, you're gonna start at 2 o'clock, light up stroke, come down like an oval. And it's pretty much the same as an oval, but you're not going all the way around, okay? You can see I'm a little uneven here. You can fill it in. And the trick with the C, that's a single C, right? But unless it's the last letter in your word, you're gonna wanna pull the bowl of this bottom of the C out a little bit further so that it can connect to the next letter, okay? So what that would look like is you're going to pull it out further, okay? So that it can connect to the next letter. So that exit stroke becomes the entrance stroke for the next letter. And then for the E, you're going to start halfway between the waistline and the baseline here. And then light up stroke, thick down stroke, and then around. Okay. Again, I'll do that again. And every time you're making those transitions, again, you're at about a quarter way between the waistline and the baseline is when you're going to start making that transition of lightening your touch and your pressure. Now that we've got those letters, Sam, I'm gonna now do, oh, I realize I need to do one more letter to do this word. We'll do the letter L. Let me just make sure I'm kind of going out of order here. The L, yeah, the L and the T, LTH. Okay, let's do LTH. So the letter L is, you start at the waistline. So this is that ascending stroke, ascending loop that was kind of counterintuitive. You're going to start at the waistline. You're going to go up to the ascender, come down to the baseline. And it's like a combination between an overturn. No, I guess it's a reverse overturn. And then you're coming down. This is just a underturn stroke, right? So that's, the L is going to look like this. You can also just do a straight L, which is just a stretched out descending stroke or underturn stroke. And if you ever have words like hello or calligraphy where you have two L's, the loops can get a little bit hard to manage, right? If they're right next to each other. So double letters is a whole other thing. And then I said I was going to do the H, right? H and T. Okay. So for T, it's that bass, stroke, right? And your crossbar, you can put it there. You can put it here. Generally, I like to put it halfway between the ascending line and the waistline, just for proportion. There's this photographer's rule called the rule of thirds, and that's kind of what's at play here. Like if you were from the top ascending line to the baseline, if you divided this visually up invisibly into thirds, because that's the height of the letter, right? It's going to have the most feel of balance. If you do it, let's just demonstrate to see what it looks like. If you do it down here, it looks a little bit stunted almost, right? And again, that will change depending on the letters that you have next to each other, right? And then the H is starting at the waistline up. So that's your ascending loop. And then you're going to do compound stroke. Right? So we'll do that again. You're going to do your ascending loop starting at the waistline, then up, thick down to the baseline, and then you do your compounding stroke starting at the baseline, light upstroke with a compound curve coming up like that. But like I said, any of these ones, you can also do an H like this with just the plain stroke, depending on the whole word that you are writing. So just a reminder, you're not starting this here. You want to start at the bottom and do the complete compound curve. So you have more breathing space right here, right? Okay, now Sam, let's get to that V and that W. No, the V in a word. So, oops. We're going to do the word love because we need more of that right now in the world, right? So we'll start with that L. You're going to go start at the waistline, up and around. Okay, so this is our first lesson in connecting letters to words, okay? And so, like I said earlier, the exit stroke of one letter becomes the entrance stroke to the next word. So we're going to do now. So here's the thing, when you're using a fat, the larger your pen is or paintbrush is, the more space you need to give yourself. So I'm going to start over here to give myself enough space. Okay. And then I'm going to do exit stroke, now entrance stroke. I'm going to start with the simple V. And the E. Okay, now that's the easier one because of the pointy bottom. But now let's do the one that's got the funny U shape, right? So let's start a new line here. So start at the waistline, come around with your ascending loop. And then let's try a different O as well, just to give a bit of variety here. So we can start this one at 12 o'clock. Okay, so this is where it gets a little unwieldy. You know, like. Now, when you look at that all together, you can tell it says love, right? Yeah, so some of it is based on context. Now, that being said, this is a really interesting case study because you see, you got this kind of, some might say, I like the fact that there's this repetition theme here happening with the loops. I personally think it's a lot going on. So my preferred way of writing that word is actually, well, there's a couple of ways you could do that. You could, okay, let me think. For me personally, I would probably mix that, the more basic O up here, or make it even simpler, which I'll show you in a second, with the more round bottom of the V there. So let's try this. Again, this is experimenting. So for the O, because I don't like all that, if because I personally really like this kind of a, you know, the loop on the V. So I'm going to keep my O pretty simple, like that's it. No loops or anything like that. And then we're going to go. So for me, that's probably my favorite way of writing that word, because it's simpler, it's quite legible. And I even just noticed, Sam, to your question, this, what I did here is kind of a combination. It's halfway between this and that, right? So it's kind of, you know, take it for what it is, right? Okay, so you can practice. I gave you a lot of letters there, so I'm going to let you get on that.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do the, I'm going to turbo through some of these letters so that you're able to at least see all of them. But like I said, because you have the basic strokes, you know, you could sort it out by looking at an exemplar, right? So, okay, so we're going to do the A, the D, A, D, G, Q, all of the oval letters. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
All right. All right, so a lot of these are going to look similar. You're going to start with the oval. We're going to do the 2 o'clock version, 2, 3 o'clock version. Right, so you got your oval, and then you're going to do the underturn stroke, just like that. We'll do a couple more. Okay, and I'm giving you a bad example here, because look how narrow that is. Not enough breathing space, right? So with a large pen, you kind of have to consciously stretch it out a little bit further to give it more room, okay? And where that's relevant is especially relevant if you are, let me find a normal pencil if I can. If you are doing a sketch, you're sketching out your word on a card or something like that, right, ahead of time, the biggest error, and it took me a while to sort this out myself and learn the hard way, was I might just be like, oh, okay, that looks good, right? I don't know if you can see that, it might be too late. I'm like, yeah, that looks great. But then when I go to ink it, what I can do, technically I still traced the pencil, right? But look how tight that is. And it's because I didn't compensate for the extra space around. And so it takes a little bit of adjustment to get used to your instrument that you're working on. Now, if you're working on a smaller pen, it doesn't matter as much, right? Okay, so that's the A. The D, there's 2 versions of the D that you can do. Again, we're going to start with a base oval. And you're either going to do a stretched out underturn stroke like that. Okay, that's the most simple one, easy one. Or this one's really fun where you do the oval and then you do the ascending loop. Probably one of my favorite letters to do. So do a couple more like that. Again, the error that tends to happen here is, okay, here, let me just show you. Another error that is quite common for beginners is to do this. Okay, so it's the same issue that we saw with the N and the M. You're not doing a complete stroke. Okay, so we want to do, again, do the whole entire oval and then add the back stroke. Okay, again, so let's do it in one color so it's less obvious, and I want to train your eye to see the finer details here. So this is the proper way. And this is the improper way. So if you look at the two there, you see, again, very subtle. An untrained eye probably wouldn't be able to see it, but you've just got more definition. What happens is you just get more definition right here, right? There's a little more breathing space there. So that's the D. Let's do the G now. Whoops. Okay, so you're gonna do your oval. And then your descending stroke. Okay. Again, pretty straightforward, this one. And again, if I demonstrate not doing it correctly, where you only go part way, again, it still is legible. It looks like a G, but you're missing out on this little bit of breathing space right here, right? Okay, so that's the G. And then the Q, again, it starts the same with an oval, complete oval. And then you come down and you do that descending loop, right? Now, I guess suppose you could also just do it. You could do a more pointed one like that. But generally with either fonts or lettering styles, there are themes in how the movements and the strokes look, right? So as you can see, the first 45 minutes we spent on the basic strokes, they're all literally just like piecing them together like Lego, right? Which is why we start with strokes and not letters, because your brain will automatically see letters instead, right? So part of it is about training your eye to see the strokes instead. Okay, so give those a whirl. The oval can be a little bit of a trick, so try that out. And any questions, let me know.
Were you going to show P too in this?
So, oh yeah, thank you. Already sidetracked. Yes, P, thank you. So the P, you're gonna do just a longer stroke, basic stroke. And then this is that funny bonus stroke that I was doing, right? Where it's gonna look like that. And the B is going to be more of the same. Okay, I'm gonna do a fresh page so you can see that a little bit easier, less cramped. So the easy way is just to do a straight stroke. Again, the same thing in terms of the error to watch out for is not to start like this, right? You want to start at the baseline and get that whole stroke in. Now, if you want something fancier, which is always fun with a B, is you can go start with an ascending loop instead of just a base, plain stroke here. Right? And then for the P, it gets a little much, but sometimes if you have a simple word like the word peace, and there's not a lot of ascenders, or the ascending loop and the descending loop is where you can have fun with flourishes, right? So if you have a word like peace where there's like just the one letter that you can do anything with, You can't do anything too fancy with the EACE. You can do a P with a descending loop. And it just adds a little more interest, right? Now, if you did the word happy, 2 P's like that probably would be too much happening, right? Which reminds me, another variable you could do if you have too many loops happening is you can do a P or a B with simplicity like that, where you don't do this loop-de-loop thing here, right? If you're trying to keep it more simple, okay? Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We only have 10 minutes left. I'm going to be hanging out a little bit longer after, but I do always want to honor the proper end time for people. So I'm going to just do the last 4 letters here, and then anything over, I'll do some demos on like connecting the letters into words and things like that. Okay. All right. So the K and the F they're kind of like the awkward teenager where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't quite get them to look balanced and all of that, right? So the K, the most basic one, is to do the straight stroke. And I'm going to show you 2 versions, and then I'm going to talk you through where the rule is broken on purpose. The other way you can do it is do your ascending loop as your back side. And then, okay. So there's a few things happening here. For this particular style, I like to bring this stroke, this underturn, or it's kind of like a half compound stroke, down below the baseline. It just gives a little bit of variety. It's kind of like the R dipping below the baseline. But if you actually follow the rules that I was giving you earlier, this is technically a downstroke, right? This small stroke here is a downstroke, and then this is a downstroke. Now, what's wrong with that letter? Go ahead, Sam.
It looks really thick. Like there's no.
It's just a lot of weight.
It's heavy.
It's a lot, right? It's a little extra. So this is where the rule comes in, where generally you would have thick to thin or thin to thick. You wouldn't have thick stroke next to a thick stroke. Okay. So that's where the proper way to do it is, because you got so much thick happening, right? You have this thin and then thick. So that's where you kind of break the rules a little bit. Or if you really want to keep it in your brain consistent, you would just make that K stroke going up instead, right? You could either do it, okay, here, let's do this. You could either do it like with a light downstroke, right? Now that you know how to manipulate your pen, the pressure, and go like that. Or you can just go up and down, right? So that's the K. And the K is very like unwieldy. It just is. There's no way around it. And accept it and embrace it in all of its awkwardness. It can be really beautiful when you start to get it. And then you've got the F, start at your waistline, ascending stroke, come down. Oh, you know what? I just realized that's not proportionate. You're gonna start at the base. somewhere, this is where it's like, it's a little bit about proportions, right? So I'm actually going to start halfway between the baseline and the waistline to try to get the proportions right. Right now, so just experiment with what that looks like. What happens if you do it from the baseline? And then that might actually work depending on the other letters in your word. It kind of really depends to see if it's balanced or not, right? The more simple way is just to do a simple, like a long descender loop, and then up like that. Again, it's a little bit awkward, but don't worry about it too much because you're going to try to massage it based on the other letters in the word that you happen to be using. And then the last two letters, which we don't use very often, but we will go through here, is the X and the Z, as we say in Canada. So for the X, you can do, it's like a compound stroke with kind of a light feathery touch up. You could also, I think I've seen it done like this as well, where you do like an inverted C. To me, that's like a little bit, experiment with it. That feels a little bit, I like this one better personally. You could also do one that's a little more simple. Wait, I guess it'd be a heavier downstroke. And a light upstroke. Okay. And then the Z is like, this is the most simple version of it. And then there's the cursive version of it, which is, you got your overturn stroke, which kind of starts, it's like a slightly shaved overturn stroke. Oh wait, I just messed it up. I just turned it into an N. Let's try this again. Overturn stroke. And then this, like that. Now, again, it gets a little unwieldy if you're doing the word pizza, right? So again, it depends on what word you're trying to do. Zebra or zoo, maybe you can use this one. But it also feels a little bit awkward teenager vibes, like the F. So I'll let you have those letters for the last few minutes here before I connect some of the letters. So if you have a particular word or your name or something that you want to be able to try the whole thing and see how it all connects, you can also do that. Start experimenting with that now. Oh, S. I forgot about the S. Sam. S for Sam. Yes. Sorry about that. The S is also kind of variables. So for the S, you can do a simple upstroke and then kind of like a muted compound stroke like that. You could also like do the same thing, but not as pronounced, right? I need a little more space though, I noticed. So that's one way to do it. You could also do like that. It's like a compound curve, but again, as long as you're following the thick down, thin up, you'll be able to get those strokes. Okay. Okay, I just want to check in for a second. How are you all for time? Do you have like an extra 10 minutes? Okay. Are you good, Catherine, with that? Or do you have something else going on? 10 minutes good? Okay, cool. Because I want to be able to join all the letters together, right? So, and show you the difference between cursive and lettering. So what I'm gonna do, what is a word that you would like to see? Anybody?
Communal? Something
Ooh,
about community. It seems
okay,
community might be too long.
we can do it. Let's try it. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do it on white paper because it is a bit long of a word, which is fine. Actually, it's all good. One of my favorite words. Okay, so I'm gonna demonstrate. Actually, I might need to move my. Can't see what I'm doing here. I want to make it a little bit so you can see the whole. Yeah, let's move it up a little bit more. Is that good? Okay, yeah, I think that's my whole. It's at the edge of my page because I lose track of where I go off the page. Okay, close enough. Let's do that. Okay, so let's do community. So I'm going to first do it in cursive. Actually, I'm going to do it. Okay, for sake of simplicity, what I'm going to do. So for cursive, I'm just going to do it as cursive. And just squeezing it in, right? But you get the point. And I don't even see, this is a funny word though, Joelle, because it's a good beginner word because it's like, usually the word that's used is minimum, right? And it's just like a bunch of like compound curves and underturn strokes and overturn strokes, right? And the dots really make a difference for the eye. Okay, so that's cursive. Okay, now I'm going to do it as lettering now. So see if you can see the difference. And I'm just changing the style of ends as well a bit. Okay, so what did you notice in how I wrote those two, or even how they look visually? Did you notice a difference?
The top one looks messy.
Okay.
And that's not like
No. Yeah, okay.
Christine has messy writing. Thanks.
No.
But the
What about it
is
makes
neater.
what about it makes it messier?
It is too much thickness.
Okay. Yep. You're on the right track.
I'm onto
So,
something.
yeah, the reason why that happens is because cursive, I'm not lifting the pen. Look, there's that happening. There's like all of this this is a good example here. Let's do this again. Okay, I'm going to do a different word. So pay attention to this word. So cursive looks like this, okay? This is actually a better word to demonstrate it on. So if you look at how I did that, I'll redo it in the blue. So look at how I'm doing the strokes. And okay, so we started with that. So what difference does that make? I'm going to do it with lettering now instead. Oh, actually, hang on. I need to start that again. So what's the difference between those two there?
You're not retracing the letters.
That's
You're
right.
not going back over yourself. So it's not.
That's
it's
exactly it.
thick. They're
So
separate.
that's right. So this is where the difference lies. Because when you do it in cursive, there's all of this extra, right? So the difference is between the shape of the E, it's more squished because you're having to stretch it from this stroke before, right? So think about it like Legos or pull apart bread. Every piece is distinct. So when you're doing cursive, you should be able to pull them all apart and have a perfectly shaped letter, right? Whereas in this case, if you pull them apart, your E would look like, it just looks different, right? It's a little bit, that's where it gets a little messy, like Joelle said earlier, right? Does that make sense? So if you can understand that, and you start to see every letter separately, but you're just writing your letters closer together so that the exit stroke becomes the entrance stroke. So Joelle sent me a great little sample of your joy. Do you want to actually hold that up that you emailed to me so we can see it? Because it's a good example of like how you can connect. Like your example is how it's not connected, but then I'll show you how you can tweak it so that it is actually connected. Or I can actually just demo what you sent me. So what Joelle had sent me was she did her J, and then she had her O, and then she had her Y, right? So the only thing you would need to adjust here to make it connected, yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I want to show how you connect the O and the Y, right? So if you do the O, and this is the other way you could do it. You could actually do your letters first and then connect them after. That's one way of doing it, right? Or you can know that this is going to intersect with your next letter, where like end your exit stroke so that you're setting it up for the next entrance stroke, knowing that you're going to hit it with your next stroke of the next letter. Does that make sense? So same thing with the word that I was doing earlier for peace. You want to pull your stroke just naturally wherever it ends, right? And then do your next letter so that it's close enough that they touch. Just like you pulled your strokes closer together so that they become letters and not just basic strokes, you're going to do the same thing with your words. Does that make sense? So try writing one word right now, and then I have one last tip, and then we'll be finished. Mission, that's a good word. Sam, I'm going to do the word that you suggested here. Okay, so how's that feeling? Is that making sense of how to put them together?
Justine,
And yes, go ahead.
connection is like connecting the letters is the challenging part. Would you recommend like draw the letters and then connect them and then work on bringing that connection in, or is it better just keep working on connecting them?
You know, I think that's actually the first time I've suggested, maybe not the first time, but I don't typically think of that because I don't do it that way. But just like that other way of making the compound strokes two separate strokes for some people, there's actually one instructor, she's pretty, she's got a large following and she actually teaches everybody to do it that way. So there's no right or wrong to this. Like, test it out to see how it feels. But like, I'll give you an example. Like if I am writing the word, this is a little sneak peek to my layout class. But the word calligraphy is such a great word because it has all of these letters that you can work with, right? So if I'm writing the word calligraphy and I want to make it fancy, I actually just start with the base part of the letters. Am I still on the screen there? Okay. So it's kind of like it's like half-baked bread that you buy at the store, right? It's not quite finished yet, but that's because I have a lot of ascenders and descenders I can play with, right? And so this is an instance where I actually don't write the whole word first. I write the base, the middle part first, and then I can figure out how I want to connect them. Like, do I want to do the L's like this? Or maybe I want to go that way, right? Or the G can go this way. It could also, the G has to go that way, or it could go this way. The P, I could flourish it that way. The H can be like this, or it could go this way. You know, like there's a whole bunch of different varieties, right? So I'll always just be thinking of a base. And so let's actually just, I'm testing this out, right? Let's see if we were to actually do what advice that I just gave you, right? So if you want to connect, oh wait, now I'm actually going to Roman italics. Sorry, my brain went there because that's my 8-year-old style that I'm most familiar with. So if we were to do it like what I told you, I might even do a different version of it there. So you guys are oval. Well, actually, let's see here. And then you want to see how it goes. See what this looks like. Okay, yeah. So this is my best attempt of like trying to like, what would I do? What would it look like if I didn't connect it yet, right? So I got here. Okay. So then you would connect. Let's do it in a different color so that it looks easier to see. So you've got, you just extend, oops, too much ink, hang on. You would extend it out, right? Let it connect. I'm gonna pull it all the way up here. And then so yeah, you could do that, right? It might be a little bit artificial, but could be good training wheels, you know, in terms of like seeing where it goes. But generally, I would say, if you want to, oh, of course, I've got ink all over myself now, to be expected. So generally, if you keep in mind, just like stretch out your letters, the beginning and the end, and think of them as separate letters, but then if you're stretching them out, just the exit strokes, right? Then that will also like, okay, let's do the word that you had earlier, which is mission. So I'm just gonna like, let it just maybe stretch it just a little bit more, right? Stretch it a little bit more. Stretch it a little bit more. Stretch it. Stretch it. Right? So if I were to like keep going on this word and make it, you know, like, let's say missional, then there you have that, right? Connecting in one word. Does that make sense? Yeah. So pretty much that's what you're trying to do, is just kind of like stretch them until they like touch. No social distancing here. We actually want them to touch. Okay. So we're at 1/4 officially. So I want to, and I can see the sun has gone down over there. So this is the official close. If you want to stick around and ask any other questions, feel free. And then I will send you a, I'm going to put in the chat in case